This is episode 283 of the Books, Shows, Tunes, and Mad Acts podcast. This episode is titled David LeBrun and his memoir, Delirium Vitae. Welcome to Books, Shows, Tunes, and Mad Acts. I'm your host, Jennifer Crittenden. Books, Shows, Tunes, and Mad Acts is brought to you by The Discreet Guide, the coaching and training company for improving your speaking and writing skills, with a special focus on mastering English and advancing your career. Let's get you to where you want to go. On with the show, and thank you for joining me today. I'm so pleased to welcome a new guest to the show today. I have David LeBrun with me, so welcome, David.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about your great, fun, and also moving book. Let me introduce you first, and then we can talk about the book. So David is a multilingual French-Canadian author. With a gritty, minimalist style, his writing draws from his travels and offbeat perspectives. His short stories have appeared in Blank Spaces magazine and Caesura. Delirium Vitae is his first of three memoirs. He lives in Montreal, Quebec, where he plays hockey, consults on screenplays, and works as a technician in the art department of the film industry. So it turns out that David and I have a mutual acquaintance, friend, John Julius Reel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's how we maybe got connected, was through John Julius, which is a tribute to what a great networker and connector he is. But it was such a pleasure to read your book. And it's a little bit complicated how this book came about. So help us out by talking about how this book, which is a memoir about a time when you were trying to write a book, a different book. And can you explain what that book was and how it turned into this book?
Yeah. So in 2001, I was 25 years old, and I wanted to write this book called Curriculum Vitae, which was like, essentially a resume, but a long form resume. I had a lot of had a lot of dead end jobs, a lot of short-term jobs. And I thought this would make a good book. I think I'd worked a total of 16 jobs by that point. Some as long as an afternoon or a couple of hours, but I thought maybe I should write a very honest resume, 70, 80-page resume. So this is what happened at this job.
Yeah, right. The real resume, right? We should all do that at some point. Yeah.
Let's be honest for a change, right?
Right.
So I took off to Costa Rica. I planned on spending the winter down there with a friend and writing this book. But of course, we got caught up in all sorts of shenanigans and partying. And one thing led to another. And then I ran out of money after 2 months. And so I started hitchhiking north, not necessarily home, but I started hitchhiking north. Because of what unfolded, the word delirium felt really appropriate to me. And Delirium Vitae is a play on the term curriculum vitae. So I set off to write this book and eventually abandoned it as the real story sort of unfolded.
Yeah.
Right? The real story. I mean, this thing was writing itself. I had quite an adventure. So that's how it came to be, from curriculum vitae to Delirium Vitae. Because
you talk about the writing of the first book during this book, we do get a sense, at least, of some of the jobs that you have, which, some of them are pretty crazy. There's one where you're working in a button factory. What was that one again?
Yeah, that was
Is that the one you ran off from after like 15 minutes or something?
Yeah, I think it lasted probably 2-3 hours. I can't remember. It was a time ago. But yeah, the boss was a real tyrant, and I showed up here and he was screaming at everybody. And I thought, what is this? I'm not going to last. I'm not staying here. And he got upset with me at one point very quickly, right? I've only known him for 90 minutes and he got upset about something. I thought, this guy's a crazy, crazy person. He sent me out back in a separate building. He said, "Why don't you, after your break time, why don't you go and pick up the inventory book and see if you can figure it out? You seem like a smart guy." And I went back there and I stuck the key in the lock and it broke.
Oh,
And I thought, there's no way I'm going back into this factory and telling this old curmudgeon that I broke, that can't even open it, can't even unlock a door. Right?
yeah. So much for being smart.
Yeah. So I jumped the fence. I literally just jumped the fence and went home, and I was very happy to go home, just to get away from this madman.
It is funny. There's something about going out to work where sometimes we do find ourselves exposed or involved in situations that we never would have anticipated. I mean, there's
Yeah.
something about these hourly short-term jobs. I remember a couple of the ones I did, like I detasseled corn for a while.
Mhm.
And then I had another one where I was basically pulling cattails out of a pond. But there's
Right.
something, you find yourself in situations or with people that
Yeah.
these are not my people kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
feeling.
Mhm.
But also that there's something that definitely feels risky about it, right? You
Yeah.
don't, because you're kind of at the whim of whatever tyrant boss has, managed to be
Mhm.
running some, sketchy operation for something.
Yeah.
And I was thinking there's actually something a little bit similar to that with traveling, where again, you're outside of your comfort zone, you're outside of your normal milieu, so to
Mhm.
speak, people
Yeah.
that you know. And there's something very similar actually about this change of environment that you're describing, whether it's going to short-term jobs or traveling, especially in Central America without very much money. And of course, your friend Mac, although, I mean, he's a friend and there's a lot to like about Mac,
Yeah.
he also was involved in kind of a lifestyle or a situation that was somewhat foreign to you. So yeah, it's interesting to
Mm.
think about the parallels actually between these two books. And yeah, I guess that's the connection. But yeah, they're both interesting. One
Mhm.
of the things that's sort of amazing to me, actually, now that I think about it, in the memoir that is now published and that I'm holding in front of me, and that I do recommend to my readers, I think you would really enjoy it, is that you actually finished the Curriculum Vitae book and sent it off to an editor, which is kind of miraculous considering the circumstances that you were in during those travels. You're camping with
Yeah.
crazy people and doing drugs, and yeah, it's just not normally what you would think of. Oh yeah, this would be great situation to write a book.
Right. Yeah. Well, it was definitely a naive attempt, and I can't even imagine if that thing had ever been published.
You're kind of glad it wasn't.
It's not for sure. It's a half-baked idea, literally.
Yeah, right. Yeah, literally. But it was, I mean, you actually did finish it. And, I was going to ask you something sort of interesting about the cover of this book. So the cover features a notebook, a spiral bound.
Yeah.
It's sort of like those little kind of like reporter notebooks with the spiral at the top, right?
Yeah.
Instead of on the side like the
Mhm.
school kids have.
Yeah.
And then sort of strangely, it features this sort of almost Norman Rockwell kind of picture on the front
Yeah.
of a boy doing something with paper. Maybe he's writing or drawing. But the notebook is just beat all to smithereens, right? It's just totally weather
Hmm.
worn. And yeah, it looks like it traveled with you. And
Yeah.
then you can see that there's writing behind it, that someone has been using this little notebook to take
Hmm.
notes. But it's an interesting contrast between, yes, this little happy go lucky fellow on the
Yeah.
front, and then the fact that, yeah, this really is a record of some, pretty intense life experiences. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. Tell me about the cover.
Yeah. The cover. I mean, that is the only notebook I've kept from this trip. So I've had that notebook
Oh,
for,
wow.
well, I guess it's been 24 years now.
Wow.
it was the last one I'd used. I didn't think much of it at the time, you know.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, it's funny you mentioned how it's so beat up and torn up, but those the corner of the notebook that's torn up had been torn up to make joint filters.
It went to good use.
Yeah, so here I was tearing up this what would eventually be
Right.
the cover of my book, just so I can smoke some weed.
Right. There's a
Really,
whole story right here in the cover
yeah,
of
it
this
seemed too
book.
perfect. It's like, oh, this notepad is telling a story, and it's
Yes.
and the innocence of it contrasted with its condition and the background and the font of the title
Hmm.
all creates some interesting contrast with this, which is what's going on in the book too, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And life. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really great. Okay, so you're obviously now a different person from the young person who was traveling around Central America 24 years ago at the age of 25. And so, yeah, tell me what it was like to write about a younger version of yourself.
Yeah. It was surprisingly not too difficult because I had so many notes to work off of
Aha.
and recordings. I'd recorded a ton, which is mentioned in the memoir.
Yeah, you carried a little tape recorder with you.
Yeah, I was obsessed with it. I'd been obsessed with writing since I was 19, and often just recording conversations with friends with their consent, obviously. I thought I could use these conversations for writing in the future. So I carried that on during this trip and recorded everything and everyone. And once I came back from this whole saga, I hammered out a draft,
Mhm.
which then became a screenplay at one point. It's a very long story. The screenplay then became a memoir again. So it wasn't too hard for me to keep the narrative distance really close to the action.
Right. Yeah.
That was important for me to do. It seemed better or more immediate if the narrator was also immature or
Hmm.
probably, a bit unreliable, as opposed to doing the opposite. And said, let me write from a 48-year-old's perspective on stuff that
Right.
happened 24 years ago. That just didn't sit right with me. I don't know.
Hmm.
The story was just too vivid and too raw, and I wanted to keep it as close to the action as possible. So really, it wasn't a challenge at all for me to write the 25-year-old version of me. I was still pretty close, and I remembered everything so vividly.
Yeah.
That, yeah, I could recall the emotions very well.
Uh-huh. No, it's interesting that you could tap back into that. And I really like that you did that now that I'm thinking about it, because, it would be really easy, or at least for me, I think I would have a really hard time to look back at myself at that age and not pass judgment or make excuses or just be too embarrassed, right? To write
Yeah.
about it. But it works really well. You've done such a great job at that. You definitely feel as though you're feeling the
Mm.
reader, me.
Right.
I definitely felt as though I was, with you on this very the moment of the events that are being described in the book versus, sort of this, I remember back when I was, that sort of remove
Yeah.
that some people have in their
Mhm.
writing. But
Yeah.
it makes it more electric, of course, and more interesting and more engaging. But it's great that you were able to do that without, as I say, passing judgment or, yeah, hiding things that might
Mhm.
make the experience less genuine or less
Yeah.
authentic. It
Mhm.
really is yeah, there's something very, yeah, very immediate about this book. And maybe that's partly what happens when you travel too, right? That you're so focused on the now, it's hard to think about 2 weeks from now because you've got to get through this day. You've got to
Yeah.
get water. You've got to, yeah, you've got to
Yeah.
cope with what life is putting in front of you.
Mhm.
There are a ton of really great blurbs that you have on the book, but one of the ones that I like the best actually is from Joshua Moore. I don't know
Mhm.
him, author of Model Citizen, but he said, rich with wild language and a big hearted journey into human confusion, which is, yeah, it's a really nice description for what is happening to a young person while they're traveling, right?
Yeah, I really appreciated that blurb because he absolutely nailed it.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't have thought of using that word confusion, but
right.
of course I use delirium, but
Yes, right. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
still, yeah, yeah, it's a great word.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes well with the book.
Hmm.
Okay. So do you think reliving some of those experiences by writing about them led to any insights about the experience or about yourself?
Yes, yes, absolutely, definitely. But I didn't realize anything until I think it was 2 years into the memoir, 2 years into writing the memoir, when some of my readers, some of my critique partners, point out to me that they don't understand this character. They don't
Yeah.
understand this young man. Like, why is he torturing himself in a foreign country? Like, he's run out of money. Now he's in southern Mexico. He's street busking with a bunch of strangers. He's down and out. Things are dangerous. Things are sound pretty awful at times. And why doesn't he just go home? Like, why doesn't he just go home? And I didn't have an answer for them, I think so. I started writing it again maybe 9 years ago. So I'd say 7 years ago, I didn't have an answer to that question.
Mm.
So I understood something was wrong. I understood, that the character's emotional journey was fractured.
Oh,
So it did a lot of digging and eventually came to the understanding that in my 20s, during this trip, especially, I was definitely living in some sort of denial, right? I did not want to go home. My father had died a few years before. My mother had had a massive stroke, which disabled her. And speaking about these things, these emotional disturbances, was something our family never did. We just avoided it. We preferred to sweep these things under the rug and not face the discomfort. As much as it was a loving family and they were good people, but I think they just weren't equipped
mm.
to help navigate these really tough times. So I became pretty much numb to it, right? Which led me to running from things, to running from my problems, to continuously start my life over and just run
Mm.
off. Yeah, it led to some major insights as I had to write all of that into the manuscript in order for the reader to come along on this more logical emotional arc.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm very thankful for that. The memoir really helped me actually process just realize that I had some unresolved issues.
The book is, I think somebody described it as a rollicking adventure story. That might have been John Julius Reed, actually. Sorry,
Hmm.
who said that?
Hmm.
Yeah, a rollicking adventure story about crazy
Yeah,
drug fueled times and wacky
yeah,
characters. And it is all
it
of
does.
those things.
Yeah.
But it is also about your relationship with your parents. And I just read this again last night. But the picture that you paint in the book of having to go back to, obviously you're Canadian, and that was one of the things you say in the book is, well, it's really cold in Canada right now, so I
Mm.
don't want to go
Yeah,
back.
yeah. That
But
was
the
nice.
idea of going back to cold Canada,
Yeah.
where your mom's not living in the family home anymore, she's been moved into this apartment complex.
Yeah.
And you said something about, I just can't imagine anything more depressing. And it's true. And it's not as though you abandoned your mother. She was well taken care of. Your sister was there and
Hmm.
so forth. So I don't want to give the wrong impression to
Yeah.
the readers, but it really struck me. I mean, reading it again last night, it was like, well, yeah. I mean, that's a really tough thing to face, right? To
Yeah.
have to go back, and it does seem really depressing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the memoir does a great job, I think, of the fun, crazy times, and also bringing out these issues that really affect us throughout our life, right? These profound experiences that you have. The other
Hmm.
one that struck me was, that you lost a school friend at the age of 12 with his
Hmm.
family in a car
Yeah.
accident. And, these things that have just thumped you out of the blue at a young age, loss of your dad, they really affect the reader too because of the way they're portrayed in the book.
Yeah.
Very, very moving. But one thing, when you were crying about your friend,
Mm.
your mom said to you, "You better, you're going to have to stop crying, or we're going to send you to a shrink."
Yeah. I can
You're,
laugh about it now.
I
It's
was going to say you're laughing now, but I was thinking,
it's yeah. I mean, that was my mom. It was like try to make things better by just telling someone not to cry. It's like you just hope the crying stops. I don't know what to say to you. You just hope. This is my motherly instinct is like, can we just stop crying? Can you just be
yeah,
okay, please? And she meant well, but she just didn't have the tools, didn't understand. Like her, it became a threat. Like, well, we're
yeah,
going to
right,
send you to a shrink. And I
exactly.
remember I was 12 and I remember thinking, but I didn't voice it, of course. But I thought, well, yes, send me to a shrink, please. I think I need to see a shrink. I think I'm disturbed. I think, it might do
I'm
me some.
upset. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's common. I'm sure.
No, it didn't happen. What did happen instead was you stopped crying. And
Yes.
yeah, so that, yeah, that,
Stop crying and stop feeling.
yeah, right. That is a sort of a resolution to it. And so you talk about being kind of inside your head and being more of an introvert,
Mm.
which is funny because there's that parallel to the guy that you meet who claims to be a poet,
Yeah.
Luis.
Release. Yeah.
Yeah, this whole. I think if I remember one thing about this book, it's going to be this. So
Yeah.
he was talking to you about writing. Let's talk shop. And so
Mm.
he says to you, "Why do you write?" And you responded, "I don't know. Why do you?" And Luis says he writes to connect with people. Right? We often hear that
Yeah.
our work should stir emotions in others, blah, blah, blah. And then you're sitting there like, I don't connect to any of this at all, which just totally cracks me up. And so Luis says, "What's wrong with you? Am I talking too fast? Is that why you don't understand me?" And then you in your head, and I think so many of our listeners can relate to this, in your head, you go off to a different place. Luis says, "What made you such an introvert?" Right? How
Mm.
long have you felt like this? And then you tell this story about the car accident.
Mm.
So you've gone off in your head to a completely different place, right? To this experience that you
Yeah.
had as a
Yeah.
child. But of course, you don't want to tell any of that to Luis, right? It's so complicated. And so,
Mm.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can't shorten this kind of life experience. And so you
Mm.
said, anyway, I didn't want to tell Luis about any of that stuff, which is so true. And so then Luis says, "I think of writing as my instrument. You see?" Sorry, I'm going to read some of your
Go
book
ahead. Go
back
ahead.
to you.
Yeah.
And so here, this is you. "I stopped listening, distracted by a boy about 15 who had entered the yard. He carried a bucket and a sponge, and he pulled a hose along as he hobbled and dragged his rubber boots, the toes of which pointed inward. An elderly man in the yard caught me gawking at the boy. He waved to get my attention as he snuck up behind the kid, who kneeled to scrub a bus tire. The elderly man stepped on the boy's boots and flattened them to the ground. The boy had no feet. The elderly man laughed at my stunned expression. "You see that?" I said. "That's the stuff I write about."
Mm.
And to me, that just nails so many things, right? What makes you a good writer, what makes the book interesting. But yes,
Right.
this idea of observing things around you, especially surprising things like that, instead of maybe more grandiose type ideas about writing, I think is really what makes this book so great.
Yeah. I was very much, well, I continue to, but just feeling my way through these things, writing about what felt right to me to write about, what's interesting to write about. Whereas a character like Luis, who was a man I was hitchhiking with, I think for him it was more of an intellectual thing,
Yeah.
and that idea kind of bored me a little bit. When you watch and you observe this really bizarre scene of a little boy walking with boots, rubber boots that are pointed inwards, and you think, what's happening? Like,
What's happening?
he
Yeah.
has no feet, and the old man thinks it's funny to
Yeah, thinks
scratch his
it's
feet.
funny.
And how could I not write about that? But a person like Luis probably wouldn't write about that. He might think it's inappropriate that we're somehow, I don't know, making fun of this kid. I'm just making fun. I just observing the situation. I think it's a comical scenario. It's just a situational comedy. What can I do?
Bizarre life. Yeah, bizarre life scene.
Mhm.
When you were writing the book, were you tempted to edit yourself and leave out pieces, embarrassing pieces, or yeah, just bad behavior that you were worried about, or even leaving out certain characters?
Uh, no,
Hmm.
no. I think I knew that's the good stuff. Like that's the juice. You know,
Aha.
it's yeah. I'm a very private person, or very quiet, or an introvert, but I'm also just an open book. So when people know me, I don't hold back anything. I love to share,
Hmm.
the most embarrassing details. I don't know. That's just fun to me. So I thought these embarrassing moments were like they're a paramount. They're like it's just
Right.
that's what the reader will connect with.
Yes, that's right. And the character, the main character. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So the harder stuff, I mean, the harder emotional stuff, like the loss of a friend, the fact that parents didn't want you to cry about it, or you didn't cry when your father died, and so on. That is important because it motivates the character.
Hmm.
It helps the reader understand this character, this 25-year-old hitchhiker. Like, that's his backstory. That's the ghost.
Hmm.
So no, I did not want to avoid it at all, and I never hesitated. No.
Yeah, it's quite admirable, really. I suspect a lot of people would be tempted to, yeah, take some things out. But isn't that an interesting lesson? That as you say, that's where the juice is, and I actually do think that's what makes a reader keep reading. But somehow, yeah, we have a tendency to want to present ourselves as though
Mhm.
we're not human, right? As though we're not flawed,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because then I think those of us who know ourselves, like me, and know how flawed I am, it makes us feel as though we're an outlier, right? That we're alone. But in
Mm.
fact, you know, it's this revealing, it's this sharing that actually makes us connect with other people.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually important to do that so that, yeah, we don't have to go to a shrink, right? It's like, this is
Yeah.
normal, actually. Yeah, crying
Yeah.
over your friend, that's normal.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I just think it's also instinctive for us to do that. I do it to this day. So my second memoir, so I'm writing right now.
Uh-huh.
I've had a couple of good readers recently, John Julius Reel being one of them, and his friend Gabriel. They pointed out that what's up with this character? Like he doesn't seem vulnerable enough, or why does he seem to maybe a little bit too cool? And I thought, well, what's happening? Of course he was vulnerable. Of course he was, an idiot at times. And I thought, well, I just it didn't even dawn on me that I hadn't included some more embarrassing moments or some more revealing moments for this character. So I did it again.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's just unconsciously protecting myself, protecting my ego, maybe.
Well, it's very understandable. And most memoirs are of that type, right?
Mhm.
Because, yeah, it is. It's very, yeah, and a little bit dangerous in this day and age where everybody's standing by ready to judge you for something.
Yeah.
So, if dreams come true and your dreams come true, what impact will your book have on your readers?
By dreams come true, my dream, was to write a book, to publish a book, to have it traditionally published, because that, in my mind, legitimized my writing, and maybe we could open some doors for me. As far as I hope the book achieves, I mean, I set out to write a book that would be entertaining and funny,
Check, check.
right? So it's not all heavy and it's not all depressing, but that's the soul of the book. And I think there's some life lessons there that I hope some readers can learn, and maybe recognize in another person or themselves if they have some sort of maybe unresolved grief or something like that going on that is maybe steering their life at this moment. So yeah, that's what I hope this book can achieve, to crack people up and also be thought provoking.
Mhm.
but I really didn't want the subject matter to drag the reader down or to, I wanted to keep it lighthearted. And I hope I did that.
Yeah, I certainly felt that way, which, I'm always commenting about that. Yeah, right next door to comedy is heartbreak. And, the book does a good job at blending those two things together and a really
Mhm.
wonderful experience for the reader. We haven't talked about this a lot, but it's also interesting to read the book just almost from a travelogue standpoint
Yeah.
about, yeah, places that you went. And again, such an interesting juxtaposition between tourist zones and then, you off with your tent in like really a barren, desolate area with, again, in kind of a vulnerable situations. I'm thinking of that situation you got into with the truck driver who was sort of trying to trap you in his bed. And I was like, "Ah." I
Yeah.
was really glad when you just sort of leapt over. Sorry, spoiler alert here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of leapt over the seat and ran
Yeah.
off. I was like, good.
But a little too weird.
Yeah, that was. But yeah, that's another interesting aspect of the book is just exploring those geographic areas with you, which is fun.
Yeah. These are great environments, especially like if it's not your normal environment, then things are really going to stand out to you.
Yeah.
So that's excellent fodder for a writer. You
Hmm.
have to keep notes and they will serve you at some point. You make a lot of observations. Yeah.
So you have experience with script writing and in the film industry, and can you talk about what you've done and how that has influenced your memoir writing?
Yeah. So work as a technician in the art department, and that's how they call it in Montreal. In some cities, they'll refer to it as a set dresser in the set deck department.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
So we put sets together for movies and TV shows and whatever commercials sometimes, and that's my day job. But outside of that, I do consult on screenplays and I read a lot of screenplays for work.
Mm.
So I think the work around scripts keeps my storytelling tools kind of sharp. I'm
Yeah.
always living in the story
Hmm.
world of storytelling. But I think it's influenced my writing the most, and I'm not sure if it's influenced my writing, but perhaps it has. The way that I use concise language, and I'm very, very economical with language, as you have to be in a screenplay,
Yeah.
and that I tend to approach I write a lot of scenes. I don't rely so much on exposition. I write a lot of scenes,
Hmm.
and I really visualize these scenes. I'm a visual person, and I think about the lighting. What's the lighting like in this room? What time of day is it? Are there sounds outside? Like these are questions every department would ask the scriptwriter, right? How am I supposed to
Mm.
bring these things to life here? What are the costumes like, and how many extras are in this scene? And the
Right.
actors would bug you, they'd bug the director. What am I doing in this scene? I'm still in the room, right? Did you remember? Like, I need something to do, otherwise I'm sitting in the corner here. So I think my approach is more cinematic.
Yeah.
Okay?
Hmm.
I think so. That's probably the way it's influenced my writing the most.
Yeah, and that does show. I do think, though, that you do have a lot of skill with language. Also, Ken, I'm going to pull this out of your book.
Mhm.
Sorry.
I love it.
Sometimes it's the use of a word. I guess it's partly because of the image that it creates in the reader's head, but also just all the associations that we might have with a certain word. You were
Mhm.
talking, this is at the very beginning of the book. I think it's in the first page. You're talking about your dad playing the piano and how he'd stopped playing the piano. And you have this sentence in here. And before I was a teenager, our upright piano had been cut to pieces, lugged out of the basement, and dumped in a landfill like an old doghouse. And as soon as I read that, as I said, page one, as soon as I read that word doghouse, it was like, okay, this is going to be an interesting book to read. Because there's just
Mm.
certain associations that we have with that. Also, the word lugged and then cut into pieces, right? I mean, that's the image. But that use of doghouse was Yeah, was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about that. What got you interested in writing and just words in general?
Yeah. What got me interested in writing was reading Jack Kerouac when I was 19.
Oh,
I was traveling. I was I was on a similar path. And yeah, I was becoming a bohemian. So here was this writer who seemed to encourage people to just live a life worth writing about.
hmm,
And that just became my thing. I wanted to experience a life that was, so varied and so spontaneous that it would create so much interesting material. So that's why I started taking notes and recording, and I didn't want I didn't want to settle down. I didn't want a regular job, and it ties back to that those lines you just read from the book about my dad, right? He did the complete opposite. He settled down at, I don't know, 20 years old and married his high school sweetheart and had a couple of kids. Worked in the mine for 20 years, and it's a nice life. It's a good life, but
well, and then he died of cancer at a fairly young age. I mean, sorry to put, but to put the little, yeah.
died of cancer at 40. Yeah. But it really moved me. It made me feel like, oh man, like what was that all for if he didn't
Hmm.
even, he stopped playing the piano when he was, I don't know what age, and he's a very creative person, but he didn't explore that side of himself. It sort of got shut down over time. And that was kind of devastating to watch. And I think I understood this intuitively at 17,
Hmm.
18. And so once I got my chance to get out, it's like, I'm out of here, and I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I'm not doing that.
not doing that. I'm on a crazy life. Yeah, so that's what inspired me to write, for sure, Kerouac. Sorry, and a desire to entertain people too, right? I've always been a bit of a clown and a storyteller. So, yeah, put those two together, live a life worth writing about, and yeah.
And tell about it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. So a lot of writing is just craft or mechanics, choosing words, editing sentences, deciding what should go where. How did you get good at that part of writing?
Yeah, it's repetition.
Oh,
Honestly, it was just hammering away at this thing forever. Being read, being read made a big difference.
mhm.
Once you take part in critique groups and get some feedback. It's a huge thing. But I didn't go to school. I didn't study writing. I mean, I read a lot of craft books and didn't get that much out of most of them, to be honest. But you just have to. The internet is a great resource.
Hmm.
But writing and being read, that made the most difference.
Hmm.
But we do have to be careful with these critique groups because people tend to want to, streamline you into like a very safe, standardized way of writing. So once you found a couple of good readers who understand what you're doing, what you're trying to do, what your voice is, when you stray from that voice, they see you at your best, and then you can like, okay, this is what I need to do. I need to expand that sort of voice. Then yeah, you just keep at it, but it's hard work. It's really hard work. But that's all I did. I mean, I treated it like a job, like a part-time job. And of course I liked it. I enjoyed it so much it didn't feel like work to me. Well, that's a good sign.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're interested in the process. I think
Yeah.
that makes a big difference too. Yeah, I noticed that a lot with the writers that I observe is, the first draft is often a lot of fun. If you
Hmm.
can get through the first draft, that's a huge milestone, but it is often the fun part. And then the
Yeah.
really heavy lifting comes after that. And it's hard. It's hard to get through the first draft, and then it's hard to keep going after
Yeah. I should also
that.
say that, I mean, I also hired editors
Yeah, interesting.
after several years when I felt like maybe I was wearing out my readers. Just say, okay, I'm going to take this to a professional and see what I can learn. Of course, and I learned a lot of things. And then, now I'm actually a pretty good editor myself. I was just hired to edit a memoir for someone last week,
Uh-huh.
So yeah, having your work read and then reading other people's work is like that can do wonders for your writing for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, the book is very well edited. And that's really a joy because I just feel as though that part of the book production process has, in some cases, gotten pretty curtailed for some of the books that I'm reading now. And
Mhm.
yeah, I'm a little bit old school about some of this stuff. So yeah, that always is a disappointment to me. Not just typos, but just sort of sloppy. Yeah, didn't spend very much time on this paragraph. And so, yeah, it's just not coming across as well as it could, right? Which is always a shame, just missed opportunities. But yeah, your book is really well edited and well written. It's really a pleasure
Yeah,
to
I'm
read
happy
that.
I took the time to do it right. I did not, I thought I would give myself a very good chance of publication if I tightened it up so much that a publisher would think, well, I don't have much work to do here. How could they say no?
Yeah, I think you said this to me at some point. Make it easy for the publisher. That's just a really great slogan, right? Make it
Mhm.
easy for the publisher. Yes, it was nice when I got a copy of your book. I got a letter from the publisher too, which was very nice.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll do a shout out here. It's Tortoise Books.
Yeah. Tortoise Books.
Yeah. Hmm.
There you are in Chicago.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, they did a really nice job. The book looks really good. I love the cover. It's got that nice feel too. The cover has that sort of, I don't know, there's a little texture to it, which is always
Mhm.
kind of nice. But yeah, it's really well put together, you know, easy to read. Yeah, it's really good. Really
Yeah.
pro. It's really
Yeah. They did
nice.
a good job.
Hmm. All right. Do you have any advice for aspiring writers?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think okay, so a young person can afford or not afford necessarily, but they have time to travel,
Yeah.
right? And they have time to go out there and experience things. So why not do that? Like go source your material, right? Why just dream about writing and then stay in your apartment and write all the time? Like go live life and find your characters. But for everyone else, I mean, I think it's really important, like we just touched on, but develop your editorial side.
Hmm.
That's a huge thing, and you can't just hand over a mess to an editor, to a publishing house, and hope they will see your potential.
Yeah.
So take the time to learn to edit yourself, but take notes. Meanwhile, always take notes. Stockpile your notes, all your curious observations. You never know when you're going to need them. But and like I said, be a part of critique groups. Give feedback, get feedback. Don't be afraid to show someone your rough drafts. Like it's the only way to grow. It's the only way to improve. Yeah, that's the sort of advice I would give.
It's funny because your book is it's a travel book, right? So we do think about young people and, well,
Yeah.
as the book keeps drawing these parallels between, yeah, is this freedom or is this homelessness?
Mhm.
That's like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, young people can do that, right? They can travel, right? They might not have family responsibilities or a regular job that they can't quit or, building a career, all those things.
Yeah.
But a lot of what your book also shows us is that there's material to write about in everyday life right around you, like the boy with the missing feet,
Mhm.
or even the piano, right? That there is a lot to write about that
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have to, do something as extreme as leave everything and dash off to Central America. And
Yeah.
that I think that's important to point out to people that developing writer skills are really observation skills. And I also
Mhm.
feel as though that makes us just more interested and more engaged in life. If you keep your eyes open and see these things that are happening around you, right? I mean, just a trip to the coffee shop can be quite an interesting experience in human behavior, right?
Yeah. And observing, one thing that makes writing more immediate, might make your seeing more immediate, is using the senses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you're inserting these smells or sounds or, whatever. Um, so when you're out and not, you like in everyday life, I mean, if you smell something interesting or unique or, you know, then write it down. You never know when you can use that smell in your story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
what it's all out there.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes life more interesting. I
Mhm.
just read something last night about the alternative being handcuffed to a comfortable couch in front of a big TV. I can't remember where I read that, but yeah, that's been like ringing in my head since I read it. It's like, that's a really scary prospect for your
Well,
future.
I think that's in my book, is it not?
Okay, that's where I got it.
I
Yeah,
think I
I
read
mean
that about.
this alternative future is like, yeah, that really sounds pretty horrible.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, so that's where that came from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. And I want to go back to this thing that you mentioned about the writers groups, because I think that really is a pitfall for people who are put in a position where they are giving advice to writers,
Hmm.
is that there are certain things in our head that we've been told, save the cat scenarios, right? That we need to describe the age of a character. I mean, just all these quote unquote rules. And I do see that sometimes people feel as though that's the kind of advice they need to give to a writer instead of saying, I love this paragraph.
Right.
Right. I do think sometimes we have to be a little careful about either giving feedback to people or getting feedback that we're
Hmm.
not being channeled, as you say, particularly for commercial purposes, right? So people who are specialists in a certain genre, they really do have rules in their head for how writing should be done. And I think we have to be a little careful about that because it could be that the scene in a coffee shop is in fact more interesting than, these other rules that we feel as though we have to give to writers. I don't know if you
Hmm.
have any thoughts about that.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, you also have to consider the source. If you're getting all sorts of criticism on your writing, maybe, don't take it to heart right away. Maybe go and read their writing first, see if it's even doing anything for you. Do they, you know, do they know what they're doing? Do they really know what they're talking about, or are they just repeating what someone else told them
Yeah.
way to write? And that's just so boring to me.
It's a different kind of writing, that's for sure. I mean, there's so much of that that's out there now that is fairly formulaic. There's a huge audience for it, right? People like reading things a lot of people, I should say, like reading things that are very predictable, right? Where
Yep.
if you have a certain amount of experience reading, you can tell already from page 3, you're being signaled this is what's going to happen in this book. But a lot of people don't seem to mind that, right? They like that comfort, watching that play out,
Mhm.
unreal in a predictable way, no surprises, and then a very predictable ending, which is great, right? I mean, I'd love to see writers write that and readers enjoy that. But
Yeah.
if that's not the kind of writing that you want to do, then I think it's okay. We have room for a different kind of writing too that might surprise you and might do something to you, evoke a response that you didn't expect.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you're describing the difference between entertainment and like a work of art, which is maybe
Mm.
some deeper self-expression.
Yeah, I mean, we have more or less adventurous readers, right? So we
Hmm.
probably need more or less adventurous writers.
Hmm.
Well, your book is an adventure in, I guess, more ways than one.
Hmm. Yeah, it definitely is.
Well, David, that has been such a pleasure to talk to you and to read the book. I'm so glad that we got connected. And before I let you go, is there anything that you'd like to share with the listeners? Would you like to refer them to a website or any events you have coming up, or really, yeah, any call to action for them?
Yeah, well, they can check me out on my website. It's davidlebrun.ca. I've got a couple of short stories posted there, but also links to the memoir and to Tortoise Books as well. which has got a really good roster of other books they can read as well. So
Great. Okay. And I'll include that in the show notes as well, in case
great.
my listeners are scrambling for a piece of paper or a pen, if those exist anymore. Although I guess if they're writers, maybe they keep their notebook handy. But in any case, yeah, I'll include that link in the show notes. But yeah, it's just been lovely to talk to you. I've really appreciated reading the book, and I wish you good luck with all your future writing.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to support us, we'd welcome your donation on Venmo or PayPal or whatnot. Links are in the show notes or on our website, Books, Shows, Tunes, all one word, .discreetguide, all one word.com, under the support tab. And hey, while you're there, drop us a line and tell us what you thought of the episode. We'd love to hear from you. Books, Shows, Tunes, and Mad Acts is brought to you by The Discreet Guide, the coaching and training company for improving your speaking and writing skills, with a special focus on mastering English, career advancement, and executive presence. Let's get you to where you want to go. Lastly, a shout out to Podomatic, our great podcast hosting platform, and to Quincas Moreira for the theme music.